other events, that we can go to a backup source like a battery. Even if it's just like 1 or 2 second blip in the power supply, batteries and other storage can a lot of times alleviate some of those problems. And if you're from Morris, you've probably been through some of the storms we get where we lose power for just a little bit. So we can stabilize the voltage or the frequency, both of which are important in maintaining a power grid. The next thing for storage is that you really want to be able to reduce some of your peaking issues. So if you have a time when you have peak production, well, a lot of times you're either selling that power for very little, or sometimes you're just wasting the power essentially. Depending, not so much in this area, but in other places of the world and the country, they actually have negative power prices where people are producing so much power that they have to either give away or sell the power at a loss. Then there are other times when we need so much more power than can be generated in a region, we have to buy it from somewhere else or figure out ways for people to stop using power. So some of you might be on off-peak power, or you might have some load reduction measures. Well, batteries can help us alleviate some of this by storing that excess power and bringing it back online when we really need the power. The other big thing, and what I'm really excited about, is that this allows us the opportunity to store some of the renewable energy that we generate. And you know, we're starting to see more and more renewable energy generated in Minnesota. So the latest statistic I saw was, I think, for November of 2017, we were generating 25% of our energy from wind power in that month. So we are starting to generate a lot of renewable energy. And so if there is a way that we can use that better, that would be helpful in increasing our renewable production even more. And so some of the implications, if we can do that, if we can use these batteries to store our renewable power and use it later, one of them is that we produce a lot of our renewable energy locally. And that means if we're producing it locally, we're spending our money locally. Our power money, our electricity costs are being spent in the community rather than going to places where there's either natural gas or coal. And so it really is a nice benefit if your community can get that money instead of sending it out of state. One of the other ones is the reliance on fossil fuels. Generally speaking, fossil fuels have a lot more greenhouse gas production, and if you're using coal, which about 50% of our electricity is coal-based, then you're seeing a lot more particulate emission, you know, some of the mercury, things like that, that we really don't want out there. So there's a reduction in pollution if we can get more energy from renewables stored in batteries to our systems. And like I say, greenhouse gas reduction. So batteries really are beneficial to our power systems if we can use them in conjunction with renewable energy. So again, I do want to mention batteries mostly, but there are other forms of energy storage. So there are some kinetic or mechanical energy systems. So you might see in some areas where they have a lot of hydroelectricity, especially pumped water storage, where they can take excess energy, pump water up to a reservoir that's high, and then when they need that energy, use a hydroelectric dam basically to produce the electricity again. Another one is compressed air, where you take the energy, you can compress the air, store it in either a large chamber, or some people have talked about using underground mines that are abandoned, things like that. I would call this technology more in the speculative area. I don't think it's quite ready for use. Another one is flywheel technology. Basically, you get a very large flywheel, you get it spinning really fast when there's cheap power to start it up, and then you can use that to generate power later. Again, I haven't seen a lot of examples where that has been used a lot. Then you get into some of the chemical means. And so there's a lot of work being done right now on fuel cells, whether it's small fuel cells that you can put in a car and make your car into basically, you can use hydrogen in your car with a fuel cell, make the electricity from the fuel cell and run your car on the electricity. We're also interested in, because we have our renewable ammonia production system out at the Research and Outreach Center, looking at ammonia in a fuel cell. And I think that'll be a pretty exciting technology as well. But the biggest one that's really on the market right now and ready for use is batteries. So there's a bunch of different technologies for batteries. The biggest one is the lithium batteries. And really, this is the same type of battery we're seeing in a lot of consumer products. It's just really, really big. These containers here actually aren't lithium containers, but you can see that's the size of some of the batteries that people are talking about. And they're modular, so you can basically bring a semi-truck in with this battery, set it on a concrete pad, and you're pretty much ready to go. You've got to do a little wiring. I think these also have to have air conditioning and heating units. But they're pretty much ready to go. The lithium ones are the ones that if you wanted to start a project today, you could probably call up a company and they could start making the designs and have it to you pretty quickly. In fact, I'll show you an installation where they did just that. But the nice thing of pretty much all these technologies is they're designed to be modular. So if you need more battery, they can bring out another semi-truck with another battery in it. Some of the other chemistries out there, they're more experimental. I think in the future some of those other technologies are going to be less costly. If they're only using things like iron and sulfur, I think those will bring down prices. But at this point they're not quite as ready to go, and they're not as off the shelf as some of the lithium technologies. So how do these function? Essentially these are just like any rechargeable battery that you're used to using. You charge it at a certain rate from the grid or from a generator, and then you discharge it at a certain rate. And you can go back to the grid, to a microgrid if you've got a small microgrid, or directly to some electrical equipment. Like if you have an electric vehicle, you can have a battery in your garage that will charge that electric vehicle right from your garage. One thing to note though, some of these batteries, depending on the type of battery, they can lose charge over time. So you do have to think about that. It's just like storing your, if you recharge some batteries at home and you store them for a year, they're probably not going to have the same amount of charge. But they're very simple, and I personally think that especially some of the lithium batteries just really offer a lot of simplicity. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to run them. They charge just like your small batteries. And there are a bunch of different scales of these batteries. So this first battery here is a Tesla battery. This is the Powerwall battery. And again, this is modular too. You can get 3 of these Powerwalls stacked on your garage. And you can use them either to charge your electric vehicle or as part of your house electric system. Then Tesla also makes another set that's more for commercial applications. Those are much bigger, so a factory or a business might want one of those stacks there. And then this set of batteries is kind of the industrial scale battery bank. And I was talking about how fast these can be developed. This was developed in 100 days. The Tesla company said, we can do this in 100 days or we will give it to you for free, and they did it. They had everything done once the permits were ready. In 100 days, they had this set up. And this, to give you a little perspective on scale, each of the wind turbines we have out outside of town is about 1.65 megawatts worth of power. So together, the two are about 3 megawatts. So these batteries here could take 30 hours of 100% output from the 2 turbines outside of town here. And roughly speaking, this would supply about 7,000 homes for 1 hour if the facility was discharging all at once. So that gives you a little bit of perspective on the scale that these are set at. So where they're most useful, really they're most useful when you have excess production and it is semi-predictable. If your production is random, it's really hard to start fully integrating the batteries. The other thing is when your demand occurs regularly. That's also nice to know because you can tie the battery type you have with production and demand, and it will bring in and release power sort of in the most optimized way if you have these two things going on. The other thing is pricing. So if your peak power prices are very high, that's when batteries will start to be economical for you. Now, if you're a homeowner, if you have renewable energy, a battery can really help you out, especially if you're paying high prices. And I don't know if you guys have talked a lot in your previous meeting about time of day pricing, but the power company, one of the things that they do is power prices for them, the wholesale power prices, depending on what the time of day is, can be very different. In the middle of the night, power prices are almost zero because not many people are using power. And we've got all these wind turbines that spin no matter what time of day it is. Whereas in the middle of the day, say 3 o'clock, that's when peak power hits in Minnesota. So the prices are very high because everyone is trying to use electrical appliances. So as a homeowner, if you're paying time of day pricing, you could actually, with renewable energy hooked up, you could be charging your batteries at the right time and then releasing that power back to yourself when you need it and when the power prices are high. Now, in Minnesota, time of day pricing isn't an issue yet, but I would say that over time that might start to happen because it's one of the ways that you can start to control people and their power use. Because if somebody knows they're going to pay 5 or 6 times the price in the afternoon as they do overnight, they might start changing when they do some things. You can wash your dishes at 2 in the morning and nobody really cares. But we don't have that here yet. A couple of us were out in California earlier this year, and they're just starting to introduce that to their customers this year, I believe. Already a lot of businesses are on time of day pricing, but they're much bigger users, so that's why they're set up that way. Just to kind of give you a case study here, the reason we went out to California, and Troy was out there, and Brian Herman, who's going to speak, was out there, was to look at some of their battery storage technology. And right now they're facing a lot of issues in California with some of their natural gas power production. Their electricity production has been based on natural gas, and if you remember a few years back, they had a large fire at one of their natural gas reserves. And then some of their natural gas plants are next to the ocean and are using ocean water and discharging heated ocean water, and they're being told that they have to shut those plants down. And so they're looking at other ways of working with their power systems so they can recoup some of the generation capabilities. But one of the things that they find is they have tons of extra power during the early part of the day and the middle part of the day, and so power prices go negative for them sometimes during the middle of the day. And then at night or in the evening, when people start getting home and turning on their air conditioners, that's when they start having their peak power demands, and prices go way up for a lot of the consumers, for a lot of businesses. And so what they've started to do, because they know they have this regular production, they don't get a lot of clouds, so their solar production is really high almost every day, and they have a lot of demand every day when people get home and the air conditioners all need to go on. And so they've matched this up with battery technology. And they can put these in at a better price than if they had to build new production facilities, new natural gas plants or other facilities. So what they're finding is that this, for them, in their pricing structure, works really, really well. And that was kind of the takeaway we saw there, is that almost everybody there was really happy with them. A couple of things they did. One of them is they streamlined the rules for very quick permitting, so they could do this very quickly. And it really does complements their existing solar overproduction during the afternoon. And it also fits in well as they transition to time-of-day pricing for their customers. And as I said, it's cheaper than their natural gas peaking plants can be. And really, I think a lot of people the consumers are starting to say, hey, we want to see more of this kind of stuff. So they're seeing that the power companies are saving money, which then reflects in their power bill, so they like that. Some of the barriers for our state, we are quite a bit different than California. One of them is because our renewable energy is primarily wind, we have these long periods of intermittency when we don't see any wind. So we might go 3 or 4 days without wind. And a battery doesn't work quite that long yet. I think that it will happen. The other thing is for the utility company and the homeowners, these are pretty expensive still. And our power is cheap. Really, Minnesota has some of the cheaper power rates in the nation. So it's not quite to a point where it makes economic sense yet. And we don't have some of the pricing incentives. Time of day pricing isn't an issue here. But in the future, I actually think that it might happen, but it will be a while here. California tends to do things, they like to pioneer things, whereas we tend to sit back and check things out for a while. But the economics, I think, are going to improve. I would say right now this is probably not a technology that today would make money, but I bet in 5 years the situation will be different. And it's because we're seeing some of the first of these batteries being put out there. But in 5 years, I think the technology will be ready to go for a lot more people. So I think you'll start to see prices come down. It's just like all the new technology we get, prices come down after a few years, after it's been tested a bit. So some of the future directions that I see, one of them is I think we really need to start identify where storage might be useful. You know, what renewable energy systems, what places within our community might this work well. The other thing is start to identify the price where the storage might be beneficial for us. You know, if we can right now say the storage for a megawatt of energy, the system to do that is, and I'm just going to throw a number out, say it's $1 million, and we know that won't work. Where will it work? Will it work at $200,000 or $300,000? If we start thinking about those things now, we can be more prepared when that technology is ready. And as we start planning for more renewables, you know, if we're thinking about new wind turbines or new solar electric systems, start to plan about storage, how storage would fit in with those systems. And then a little more for our community members, you know, start to look at some of the things like off-peak battery charging. I know you don't have electric cars yet, but at some point you may. And it may be beneficial to have either another battery to charge in your garage or to charge your car battery itself off-peak. If you're producing power, if you have solar or wind of your own, start to look at some of these batteries and the power rates you're going to see if you have them. And then just check back periodically and look and see as things change, how might that change whether a battery would work for you. So that's my quick introduction. Most of you guys probably know where I hang out, so you can find me if you have questions.